What's up? So recently I got my white Swiss Shepherd puppy and obviously I started to take more and more dog photos. And that's why I want to share my favorite tips and tricks with you so you can take better dog photos as well. And first let's talk about lenses. Currently my favorite lenses for dog photography are the 70-200 2.8 and the RF 24-105 f4. These lenses are in my opinion great because they combine a really nice range for a variety of photos, and especially if you want to take some photos of your dog, it is way easier if you have a certain range that you can use to create a really nice setting. First let's talk about the 24-105. The 24-105 f4 is my favorite all-round lens, especially for some wider shots. I mean, I can take these awesome wide shots using 24mm, I can take some great portraits with 35, 50 or 85mm, and I can zoom all the way into 105 if I need to get really close. On top, especially in situations where you don't really know what kind of things you want to do, it is always annoying to switch between lenses all the time. But with the 24-105 you can easily use just this lens for a variety of shots and you are always prepared for all kind of scenarios. Of course, it is possible that you will notice the f4 limitation in low light situations, for example, but especially if you work with some newer cameras, this is still fine. And exactly that's why I always have this lens in my camera bag to be sure that I can always use it if I need it. And now let's quickly talk about the 70-200. First, of course, there are two versions out there, so the f2.8 and the f4 version, which is a little bit cheaper. Of course, the f4 version is still fine and you can still get a really nice blurry background, but in my opinion the 2.8 version is the way to go in most cases. One of the main reasons is that you can simply get the nice compression and the bokeh if you shoot at 2.8, and that actually makes it possible to underline your composition and to let your dog stand out even more. Especially in this case this is really helpful, and on top you have this great range from 70 up to 200mm, and that allows you to take shots on all kind of situations. So if you have a 70-200 at home, I can highly recommend to use this lens. It's my favorite lens for dog photography. Another tip that I want to share with you is all about camera settings. And first let's talk about the shutter speed, because this is actually one of the most common settings that you should adjust for dog photography, because one of the main goals is to freeze the motion in your photos. Because if you take photos of your dog while using shutter speed settings that are way too slow, your camera needs way too much time to take the photo while your dog is still moving around. And that causes this motion blur effect in your images, because something in your frame is still moving around while your camera tries to capture the moment. And to avoid this problem you always should start with faster shutter speed settings, so for example everything above 1/500 or even more. In this case it totally depends on how fast your dog moves around, so before you start to take photos, think about what kind of photos you want to take and use faster shutter speed settings to avoid the blurry photos. Another really important topic that we need to talk about is ISO, and yes, if you use faster shutter speed settings your overall image gets darker, so that's why you need to care about your ISO settings as well. And of course I know everyone says that you need to be careful if you start to increase your ISO, but in the end what I always say is don't be afraid to use higher ISO settings if it is necessary to get the shot that you want to have. So for example, if you can't make the image brighter by using different settings or additional lights, you simply have to increase your ISO. And of course, especially today's cameras can actually handle higher ISO settings really good, and on top you can even edit your photos later on in Lightroom as well to reduce the noise and grain in your images. And as a quick example here, sometimes I really like to add some grain to my images because it just gives this image this natural look. So yeah, don't worry, it's okay to use higher ISO settings, especially if it is necessary to get the shot. Another really important setting that we need to talk about is the aperture. And yes, of course, everyone loves the nice bokeh that actually separates your key element from the background. It just looks great, but it is possible that the wrong aperture setting can lead to blurry parts as well. So yeah, in this case it is really important to test a couple of settings to figure out which one is the best for your photo idea. You can even use the aperture to set a focus on certain parts in your frame, so I highly recommend to not just stick to one aperture setting, actually try to be a little bit creative and use the aperture as an advantage to let your key elements stand out in the best possible way. The next tip that I want to talk about are angles, and yes, this is so important if you want to improve your dog photography. If you want to take good photos of your dog, I highly recommend to get on their level. Don't just take pictures from above. In most cases it just looks way better if you get down on the ground and look straight into the eyes of the dog. In this case you get way better and natural images, so always remember that you want to tell and share their story, not yours. Next let's talk about locations, and in most cases you don't need to search for some crazy locations. Of course, if you know some special spots, that is great and I highly recommend to use them, but in most cases you can take a lot of stunning images in your garden, house or maybe in the forest. But the most important part here is keep it interesting, safe and be fast. So if you don't know how to set up your camera properly, actually learn that first so you can adjust your settings quickly, because you absolutely want to avoid the situation that the dog gets bored. Always try to combine the shooting with some nice adventures and you will get the most beautiful images of your dog. And of course it needs to be safe. Don't use any unsafe places, instead use a quiet space where you don't have to worry about any potential situations that could lead to a a variety of problems. And that's a perfect opportunity to talk about your shooting mode, and you don't want to miss any moments, so use the continuous shooting mode and keep your frame rate high. So if you just try to take one picture at a time, you will miss a lot of great shots and you have to start over and over again if something went wrong. So always try to avoid that. But now let's talk about tip number 9. Be prepared. Before you go out to shoot, I highly recommend to double check your gear, clean your camera and lenses, are the batteries charged, think about what kind of photos you want to take and all these kind of things. If you do this first, you will notice that it is way easier to get started and to get those results way faster because you already know what needs to be done. Especially if you already have a couple of photo ideas planned, it is way easier to come up with some more photo ideas while taking photos because everyone is already in the mood for this photo session. And the last tip that I want to talk about is one of the most important tips to get better results, and this one is just relax. As a beginner photographer, I actually got really stressed whenever I didn't get a good shot, and if that happens, you will never get the best results because you're not relaxed. So it is really important to stay calm. In the end, there's no right or wrong, it always depends on your own idea and what you want to do. Just take photos, have fun and enjoy the whole process. In the end, there are always a couple of bad results next to those great shots, and if you notice such a bad result, you will always learn something new. Maybe the angle wasn't the best or the settings were wrong, so if you notice something like that, it leads to better results the next time when you're out there to take some photos. So instead of thinking too much about what might go wrong, I highly recommend to just get started. In the end, you will get some good results if you check your settings while taking photos and if you actually enjoy the whole process. But yeah, these are a couple of my favorite dog photography tips to get better results. So, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're new, don't forget to smash that subscribe button to stay updated for upcoming videos, and I'll see you in the next video.